I'm Shaun. I'm a T5, T6 complete paraplegic. I was in a car crash 29 years ago and they gave me 2 days to live. I'm still here.
So hi Shaun, absolutely brilliant to meet you. Thanks for speaking to me today.
That's okay. Yeah, it's great to be part of this.
Brilliant. So I'm thinking if we can start with the early days. I know it was a long time ago now that you were injured, but talk to me about maybe your sense of identity after your injury.
I think it was hard at that time because obviously 29 years ago I was only 20, and I was still going through the acceptance and the understanding about what's actually happened to me. I remember the psychologist said, he came in and said, Shaun, you've been in an accident, you're not going to be able to walk again, and sort of that was it. And then it was a case of trying to get all this thought process through as to, all right, so what does that actually mean? I can't feel my legs, I'm not going to be able to walk. And then I went through that process of, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to have a relationship? Am I going to have a family? Am I going to do this? And it went through that the process of understanding exactly what was going to be, because I couldn't foresee the future. I couldn't see where my life was going to pan out. At the time, I was only 20, so I was still going through that testosterone era. All my friends were still 20, and they were going out and they were drinking and they were partying and all this. And then I was laid up in hospital thinking, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And so I think the early stages were difficult. Especially when I was laid up in bed and coming from intensive care into high dependency, and all I could see, my whole world was looking through a mirror, laid on my back, and that was it. Voices and everything else. So it wasn't until I started getting up in my chair, and then realizing that one, I am paralyzed, I'm never going to be able to walk again. But two, the fact that I was a lot better than what other people were, because at that time I was in and around individuals who were tetraplegic, so that needed a bit more care, needed a bit more support, and I'm only a paraplegic. And I know when I say that I'm only a paraplegic, but I've got full upper body strength, so I could dress myself, wash myself, and all these other things. So 20, it was a difficult time. 6 months before my 21st, and just a tragedy happened. But then, me being me, you turn that into something positive. I could have gone two ways. I could have either carried on and got depressed and fallen into this little rut, or I could have said, you know what, this is it, this is me, and take it and move on. I'm very black and white. So when things happen, you deal with it and then you move on. I'm not one for looking back and thinking, oh, well, what happened? Or should I have got into that car? I think the early stages I did when I was in bed, but when you get up and you realise that, this is it. This is me. Just sing a song.
So what about relationships? I'm thinking about your friendships, your mates that were still going out drinking and looking for women.
It's interesting too, because you realise who your friendship groups are. And you become more aware because you see the people that you thought were your friends suddenly come off the radar and disappear, to a point where when I was coming back to Lancaster, there were individuals who had been in the accident with me that would cross the road because it was their way of dealing with it. They was either embarrassed or upset or whatever, but I don't think they realised that the emotional impact that had on me when they weren't prepared to come and talk to me. They just crossed the road to walk on the side because they felt embarrassed. I mean, that must be... People deal with things in different ways, don't they? I'm an open book, so I take it in and I move on. But I think as a young man, you then become aware of your friendship. And I think that's with any spinal cord injury or with any accident that you have, you're always going to be aware that, at that time, you're always going to, you have people around you, but then you then see individuals suddenly fade away. And it's okay. It's okay because it's going to happen. And we all move on anyway. So if anybody is going through that stage at early stages, don't worry about it. Don't feel upset. Don't feel that you've been let down by individuals, because it's just a journey that we go through anyway.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it's not you, it's them.
Yeah, absolutely. People, like I said, people deal with things in different ways, don't they? And people are, connect with things in different ways, and it's okay, because we're not all we're not all going to be as laid back and as open and accepted. I think it's until you start to accept in yourself what's actually happened, then it doesn't worry who comes into your life and who comes out of your life, because it's like whether you're in a chair or not in a chair, friendship groups come and go.
Yes, they do.
Regardless, it's more emphasized when you're in a vulnerable position, because then you can overthink things, and you can, over analyze situations which you don't need to do. But it's okay, because we all do that, and we've all been through that stage. I feel like a veteran, because I've been in a chair like 29 years. So my journey has been from early self-catheterization and what we used to do then to where I am now, and all the products that were on the market at that time that were to help me on the sexual side has completely changed to what it is now as well. So old school.
Yeah, I think that'll come out in a bit actually when we move on to talking about sex. But before we get there, I want to talk about talking about sex. How was that for you in the unit? How easy was it for you to find answers about your sex life? How open were the staff to those conversations?
Oh, the staff one, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. So you're in the spinal unit. It's not a topic of conversation. Your topic of conversation when you're in a spinal unit at that particular time is your bowels and your catheter. It's not about the everyday things, the life skills that I'm talking life skills, because they are part of the life skills that you're going to need when you get discharged. Because at that moment in time, it literally is about the healing process, your bowels and your catheter. It wasn't until I got discharged from hospital, and then I started to have a relationship that myself and Dawn, my wife now, we actually went to see somebody to talk about it, because I still didn't understand, and this was probably a year or two down the line from actually having my accident. So at that time, when you're actually in the unit, it's not even a topic of conversation. I don't know if it's different now, because this is like 29 years ago when I was in the unit. So I don't know whether it's if it's just discussed or addressed or whatever. And I think for an individual, for like myself as well, although I went through the process of, at that early time when I laid up in bed, thinking to myself, can I have sex? Am I going to have a girlfriend? I'm going to get married. I'm going to have children. Da da da. When you suddenly get up into your chair, even that thought process, it doesn't come into it, because you're still having to come to terms with, 1, being in a chair, 2, learning to transfer, 3, learning to do your bowels, getting on the toilet, da da da. So you don't really think about it, or I didn't really think about it or come across it until I got discharged from hospital and I started to form a relationship.
So in the early stages, I know that you said when we talked before, you used to go out in your chair and rock up at the rehab unit with some pretty girl on your arm. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so in my early stages, so again, I was 20, I had my accident when I was 8 to 20. By the time I got discharged and I went into a rehab home, I was 21. I went through a stage of needing to have a girlfriend for a status. Wasn't, and when I say status, I don't mean, I needed a good-looking, attractive individual. I just needed a girlfriend, because it was, for me as a man, the fact that I felt that I could still get a girlfriend, because I was still going through the state. Who's going to have me? I'm in a wheelchair. What is that individual going to see in me? Because I can't do everything else that other people that were on the legs and that had that feelings could do, because for me it was a case of there's more planning involved than just rocking up and doing it. Do you know what I mean? So my train of thought was who's going to have me? So I and Dawn will tell you this, because Dawn will say, because she was there, because Dawn worked in the home when I was in there, and so I used to have a girlfriend, but that was because I needed to have a girlfriend because I was a young man. I didn't have a relationship before my accident, and I needed to have a relationship to prove to myself that I could still get a girlfriend, and I was still worthy enough to have a girlfriend regardless of my disability.
Yeah, and you were doing the things that other young men of your age would be doing.
Absolutely. And it's strange because, Dawn say that, and she will, and I know looking back on it, that I wasn't a boyfriend material. I just needed a girlfriend as a status for me, for my personal, for my emotional state of mind, for my mental health, for my feel-good factor,
And I suppose at that point you hadn't actually had the conversations about sexual function and what you could do anyway.
Do you know what? Until myself and Dawn got together, that wasn't even a factor. That it literally was. I needed to have somebody. I needed to have somebody on my arm, so that I could go out, and then people say, "Oh, he's got a girlfriend."
Yeah.
So that was the status that I needed to have. It wasn't until myself and Dawn, when I started to form a serious relationship with myself and Dawn, that topic of conversation came about, and I felt comfortable with talking about it, and I felt comfortable with talking about it with Dawn, because Dawn was already aware of spinal injuries because she worked in that environment. So I didn't feel that I had to justify, I didn't feel like I had to explain about being a para and my bowels and my bladder and that, because Dawn understood all that. But I still didn't have any idea of what I could do as a man on the sexual forefront of it all. What was, because I was completely paralyzed. The only time I was getting an erection was when I was having a spasm, and I'm like, whoa, where's that come from? Do you know what I mean? More of a shock than anything else. Do you know what I mean? Because half the time, because at that time as well, see, self-catheterization wasn't even out then, so I was still having to use the leg bags and all this. So even that was an embarrassment, because it becomes more of a planning operation that you'd have to, take your leg bag off and make sure it's emptied and do what you needed to do beforehand. So everything was planning in place. So it was hard, and I think still going through that emotional state as a young man, it was difficult,
Yeah.
So you had, once you were together with Dawn, the sexual function thing presented itself as a problem, and then you had to seek solutions.
Yeah, so we had to go speak to a psychologist in the unit, and I always remember. So at the early times, before all the tablets and all the injections came onto market, because there are different products out there. It used to be, we used to have like butterfly clips, as it were. So rubber these butterfly clips, and they used to find, I remember the guy, the psychologist used to say to, right, so what we need to do, you need to measure yourself, and we need to find the right butterfly clip that's gonna do the job. And basically you have to put this butterfly clip, push it all the way down to the base of your penis, and it cuts off your circulation. So that was like another little journey that you go through. And then obviously other things came onto the market, and he said, look, can you try these? And so I was sort of the first to try the injections. Then I was the first to try the tablets. And then so it was interesting to see how the world was progressing medically through that situation. But it was still a taboo subject, because everything was still talked about behind closed doors. I had to go and see the psychologist in his office. It wasn't talked about, and if I didn't ask the questions, then the information wasn't readily available anyway.
Yeah, so you really had to seek
help.
Yeah. Because it was, I don't know whether it's the stiff upper lip of the English or whatever, but it was yeah, it was literally having to go and find and discover, and me being me, I'm laid back anyway, and it was a case where like, I'll try it and I'll give it a go, and we can, you go back, you feedback, and you give your honest opinion. But early days, yeah. So me and Dawn is like, so, and it's great because when myself and Dawn look back of, our first week away in Scotland, like this is our first official weekend, and I'm really excited and that. And then you get to the bedroom and it's like, oh God, we're there. Right, let me just go and do my convene. Let me just go and get my leg bags on. Let me just go and make sure my bladder's empty. I'll tell you what, well, now let's get the lubrication out. Now let's get the butterfly clips out, and then we try these. And it was like, by the time we get it, I was knackered anyway, even before we even started, But it was how we dealt with it, and it at that time, because I'm, like I said, I'm an easy type of guy, and same with Dawn. We've got a great relationship, and it was we dealt with it, and we sort of moved on, and then from the butterfly kits, and we had to go on to do the injections, and it was then before they brought out, there was a piece of equipment where if you were a little bit dubious about actually using the needle, then you could actually put it in, and it became like a gun.
But it sounds like you and Dawn have got a really, really great communication and negotiation and a great sense of humour about it.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm a great believer. Like, you have to laugh at yourself. If there's anything, if you smile, laughter, it cures everything. But if you can't laugh at yourself and you can't, don't take things too serious, things are going to happen. If I go back to the early days when we were using the butterfly clips and the amount of injuries it gave me, we did, at the time it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But we had a laugh. It was like, can you remember the time? And like myself and Dawn remember the first time we went up to, and it was the Station Hotel up in, it was like, yeah. So you have to laugh at yourself. You have to look at it, and things do progress and things do move on, and then you find the product that suits you and that's best suited for you. Because if I look back about all the products I've chosen, I would say there's a couple that were best suited for me and suit for me now. But not everything. It's like anybody, isn't it? Everything is different for each individuals and affects individuals in different ways. But at that early time, everything was taboo. It was literally, it wasn't a topic of conversation about, even to a point of, for me to say, you do realise that your nipples are going to probably be the most sensitive part of your body. Nobody said that. It was only finding out from having that relationship with Dawn and that intimacy with Dawn that I realised that, wow, I get turned on from my nipples.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and everybody said, it's like, where does my satisfaction come from? Well, my satisfaction comes from knowing the fact that my partner and Dawn is satisfied. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
So your pleasure is in pleasuring her?
Absolutely.
So in terms of those early times when sex was a bit taboo and you couldn't approach the staff very easily, was there any banter amongst the guys in the ward?
Oh yeah, I was really fortunate. At the time I had my accident, there was like 8 or 9 of us. We was all similar ages, like I said, I was only 20, so we was 18, 19, 20, 21, so on, and because we had a great camaraderie between us all, and we used to take the mickey out of each other, that even itself got, we even got banned from the main spinal unit because the hospital dinners at the time weren't that good. So instead of like one of us going to the canteen, like we'd all go. So it was like the M6, like with wheelchairs going down. And at that time, it was like it was lunchtime, so all the nurses were coming out, and there's like a convoy of wheelchairs. And it wasn't that we were just like pushing down. We'd be racing each other. You got crazy. But that's what gets you through it, and that's what got us through it, and that's what. Having that open discussion with yourselves, but we couldn't have it with the nurses, and we couldn't have it with the doctors. It was between ourselves that But we didn't. It didn't even really sink into the train of thought until you got discharged and then until you was on your own. Because at that time there was a support mechanism. We'd support each other because we'd have they were supporting me because I was only paraplegic in the unit at that time, and they were helping me, making me aware that I'm lucky.
Yeah. These days, I think things are a bit different, and they often do have like an erectile dysfunction clinic, or sometimes a psychosexual therapist attached to the unit, sometimes not. Do you think that would have helped in your time? If there had have been, I don't know, a sex therapist that popped round and said, "Have you got any concerns? Do you need to come and see me?"
Yeah, or somebody that is in my situation that is going to say, "Do you know what, Shaun? It's going to be all right. You're going to go through this journey." I believe a lot in empathy than sympathy. And I think if somebody's there that's gone through that journey, that you're going to, don't get me wrong, all the doctors and nurses were great. Medically, they could do the job. They could do that. But, don't tell me, "Oh, I understand what you're going through."
Yes.
Because that's a completely different agenda altogether. Until you're in that situation, then you're never going to know. Medically, you understand the spinal cord and paralysis and all this, but it's that mental and emotional side of things that and the acceptance side of things that were missing. And I think if there was somebody like myself who was in a chair that was there to say, "Do you know what? It's going to be all right. You're going to have these difficulties. You're going to have these problems. You're going to have this journey. You're going to have this obstacle. Then I think that would have been more beneficial than for me with my acceptance at that time, because then I could say, I could then probably see where my future was going to be,
And so that could be a peer or a volunteer role, and a bit of the sexual stuff could be part of that role, I guess.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and even now, so like 29 years down the line, I don't know because if in all fairness, when I got discharged from hospital, in my head, I got discharged. It was Dawn had to tell me to go when I hit 40. Dawn had to say, like, "You need to go for an MOT." So there's me rocking up to the spinal unit with a file like that, and the doctor saying, "Oh, well, how come your files? Are you a new injury?" "No, I'm not new. When I got discharged, I got discharged." To me, that was move on. I got Dawn. If there's any problems, I deal with that. So I don't even know now if there's somebody there on the mentoring side or peer support side that is available to talk to individuals that are going through that process.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that we've talked about like some of the exploring those ideas in the early stages. We've talked about talking about sex and finding the right products. So the next thing, I often talk about the 3 F's when I talk about sex. So I talk about function, fertility, and fun. So let's have a think about the fertility stuff, because I know you've got a family now.
Yeah.
So tell me about kind of the process of going through fertility treatment.
Oh, that was another little journey for myself and Dawn, because we weren't aware of what was available. So like we covered all angles. At the end of the day, myself and Dawn wanted children. How we got children, we looked at all avenues, from adoption to obviously going down the IVF route. We were very fortunate. It was a bit of a journey. I think it was more of a journey for Dawn than it was for me, because being on the male side, I just had to do one thing.
But it wasn't something you could do naturally.
Oh no! Oh, this is a whole new little adventure for me as well, which is fab. So, and what I didn't realise, it was like a learning curve as well. What I didn't realise is like, so men's G spots are up your bum, and for me to do this, they'd have to perform some sort of like process. So they said, like, Shaun, this is what you're going to have to do. We're going to have to monitor your heart. So you have, picture this. I'm in a theatre, laid on a bed, stark naked. I've got a staff nurse there. I've got an anaesthetist. I've got the doctor, I've got this vibrator attached to this wattage, and ready to perform. Next minute we hear a knock at the door. Another doctor opened up. We've got some students coming in today. Would it be all right if they came in to watch? Maybe, bring him in. My kids came in a room full of 20 people. Amazing. So vibrators in, doctor's turning it up. My legs are going like this because of spasms legs. So the staff nurse had to get two of the student nurses to hold my legs down while she's got the pot round my willy to catch what was coming out. And the doctor's saying, "How are you doing, Shaun?" And I'm just in stitches because it was just making me laugh. You couldn't write it. Anyway, so she gets what she needed to do, puts it in the tub, puts it in a taxi, sends a taxi to the Liverpool Women's Hospital. Just as Dawn got to Liverpool's Women's Hospital, she come through, and then the guy said, "Oh, there's a package for Mrs. Gash. Your husband's here." There I am, in this little pot. So that was the story. That was the start of our little journey with children. So then we had to go through obviously the IVF situation of Dawn had to have her embryos, and then they had to insert my sperm in the embryos and da da da. So yeah, it was interesting. But they didn't say. But we didn't know anything about all this. We weren't given the information that this is what's going to happen. It was like, you're going to have to come in and we're going to have to perform this. But there wasn't any graphic detail and preparation. So I just took it and went with it,
I guess these days it's much more about informed consent, and there's probably an information leaflet and all the rest of it these days.
Probably, you have to remember this is 29 years ago,
Exactly.
So and the unit itself was a new unit, and then me being me, like I'm a great bring them all in. And then when you start counting, like 1, 2, 3, it's like 20 students, 20 students in the room who were probably all thinking, "Oh my God, this is like an awkward moment," because I'm I'm there, bring it on.
But when you think about it, it's like the most intimate thing that anybody does, isn't it? To orgasm and ejaculate.
Yeah, but it wasn't because one, I couldn't do it myself. It is. I know what you say. It is. You don't realise the fact that once you've lost that sensation. And don't forget, every spinal injuries is completely different. So regardless of what break you are, every break, so I'm a T5, I know that there's my friend, he's a T4, and he can have children naturally.
Right.
And so because I had to go through my situation, it's not the same for everybody. So, get all the information that you need, find out, understand your body, what you can do, what you can't do, and then go down the process of finding out what you need to do. Whereas me, I'm just all gung-ho and bring it on. But at that time, information wasn't available. It was still a taboo subject. We still had to find out about, the IVF and the ICSIS and all this side of things.
And I think it's good advice for anybody new, isn't it, that be in charge of your own information seeking and knock on doors.
Yeah. And the thing is, I know my body now, so you'll get to know your body. You'll get to know, like now I know that if I got myself dressed and I've probably got a crease somewhere and I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable, my body will tell me, because my legs might start shaking or I might start sweating, but I know that I need to maybe adjust myself and stuff like that. So you'll get to know your body, you'll get to know the signs, you get to know the symptoms about what they actually already mean. I can tell you the sign that if I need to go for a number 2, or if I need to go if my bladder's full, because my body tells me that, and I know that I'm ready to go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
But ask, get the information, find out what it said. Don't feel frightened or embarrassed to talk about it, because nobody's actually readily going to give you that information. You really got to prize out of individuals.
So at the end of your IVF process, you had how many embryos frozen?
So we had 9 embryos, at that time we had, so at that time they placed 2 back, and it was Shaun and Kyle. So they're not identical. So they're non-identical twins. And then we still had 5 embryos left, which they stored, froze. 5 years down the line, we then get a phone call from Liverpool's Women's Hospital. Hi, Mrs. Gash, we've still got 5 embryos. What do you want to do with them? Do you want to donate them, or would you like to have another go? So Dawn's like, well, let's have another go. So 5 embryos defrosted, 1 survived, and it was Neve. So I've got 3 wonderful kids who were all conceived at the same time, but there's 5 years apart.
Yeah.
And that's a story when you say, and when people think, I don't understand that. They was actually all conceived at the same time, but there's 5 years difference.
Yeah, it's really special, isn't it?
Absolutely. And they're all chalk and cheese. You know, they're completely different in character, in looks, and everything.
So in terms of parenting, Shaun, have you had any concerns throughout the years?
I went through another phase when Shaun and Kyle were born that made me realise that I was different, because of my balance, I couldn't bend down on the floor, and I struggled to change the nappies and stuff like that. So my way of helping and compensating was, I used to sit there with, I was able to sit there with Shaun and Kyle in the palms of my arms, while and I literally was rocking like that, and they used to go to sleep. But that was me. Once I was there. I couldn't. I wasn't moving around. But when they started growing up, you go through another little phase of, because my son wanted to play football and rugby, and when you go and see all the other parents that are kicking footballs and stuff like that, you start to think, oh, I can't do that. So then we compensated that by, I used to go in goal, and I used to be like a moving target, and Kyle used to kick the ball, and I used to save it. And so you find your way as a parent to deal with it. But it was still at that time, because at that time you still had that emotional and that mental health thinking to yourself, oh, you judge yourself as a parent because you see other parents. You start to, and we do it. We just do it naturally. We start to have that comparison between other parents and you and everything else, and it's just a process that we go through, and any parent goes through, whether you are in a chair or not in a chair. Everybody tends to compare themselves to how another parent is bringing up their child or children or whatever, and we shouldn't do that, but we just do. But I think again, it's emphasised more so because you're in a chair. Because, when I used to go and take Kyle to rugby, some of the times the fields were actually bogged down, and I used to, because I couldn't get there, I used to sit at the side, and Kyle used to be, on the pitch further away, and the other fathers that were there, the other dads that were there, wouldn't come over to me and ask if I needed help. So I'd just basically sit there, But when I got to know them and they got to know me, then it got to a point where they'd help me and they'd get across the fields and stuff like that. But at that time, you then do feel a bit isolated again. It's just another process that you go through. But, 2 ways of dealing with it. You can either stop going and miss out on watching your child and being involved with that, or you can say, do you know what, it's fine, I'll deal with it, and then you sort of move on.
Yeah, instead of dwelling on what you can't, you focus on what you can.
But as a parent in a situation where you are vulnerable, and you have a different ability, because I hate the word disability, but you have a different ability, you are always going to judge yourself, and you are always going to question yourself as a parent. Am I a good parent? Am I not a good parent? And my kids are rounded kids. My kids they just know me as Papa Wheels, and they know about, where they come from with the IVF side of things. We've never held anything back. We've always been open and honest. They know about my catheters and my bowels. They know about that. They know about if I get a pressure mark, I'm out of bed and I'm completely. They know all about that. So they become more aware and more rounded as individuals and more accepted with everybody else. It was weird. So really good stories when. I used to go to the Rotary Club in the UK. They used to have this big Rotary Games in Coventry, and we used to go every year. We used to go, and the year that we went, the Shaun and Cal must have been about 18 months, 2 years, and so they've always been around a wheelchair. Well, when we turned up, there's you're talking hundreds of wheelchairs, and this is where this is where I can only show that they were rounded, because they were getting up, they'd go to another wheelchair user and they'd be climbing on their lap to sit on their lap, because they weren't fazed by it. That's what you do. You see a wheelchair, you climb on it, and you get on your lap and you have a ride, and that and that was it. So so that's we don't worry about becoming a parent, and don't worry about feeling isolated or feeling that you're not a good parent, or you're judging yourself or criticizing yourself or doing all these things, because you find your own way of becoming that special parent, that special bond, and your children will only know you as you are. I suppose it's completely different if you've had children before you had your accident, because I'm only talking about me from a young man not having a relationship and having a relationship and going through the IVF situation. So, I don't know. I can't talk on that side because I have no understanding with that side of things.
It's not your experience, yeah. So what about travelling? I imagine you've travelled a lot. I know you're really big into your diving, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But I'm thinking about family holidays. How did that pan out?
Oh, family holidays is like an ordeal. You have to plan everything. You have to plan where you're going, making sure that the facilities are there, making sure that the facilities are there for you, and then everything else falls into place. But it was traveling wise, and then you find that you're having to pay extra because you're wanting, an extra piece of equipment or a bigger room. And because obviously there was myself and Dawn and Shaun and Kyle, there wasn't any family. There's no family disabled rooms. And it's like, well, do not think that anybody in a wheelchair can have a family, but there isn't any family. You then have to pay for 2 rooms, and they have to make sure that the 2 rooms are adjoining rooms. The amount of time we've turned up to a hotel where we've had to pay for 2 rooms, and we've got one on the top floor and one on the bottom floor. And it's like, we're in the 21st century. We should be able to realise that families are families, and nowadays it's not the 2.2 children families anymore, is it? Families of children they've got 5 kids, 6 kids, whatever, And
I suppose there are accessible rooms and there are accessible rooms.
Well, listen, you only have to put a bar at the side of a wall next to a toilet, and you've got disabled facilities.
Yes.
There's a grey area. I like going out to the States, because over here it's completely different. In England, it's completely different with our laws, right? So there's a grey area. There's always we've made reasonable adjustments. So we've put a bar on the wall. Well, the disabled facilities out in the States, they are the facilities. I don't have to worry about going out there and having a wet room or having an accessible toilet, because I know it's there. Whereas over here, we have to do more planning, and we have to do more preparation, and we have to ask for more information from that individual or from that hotel or from wherever, to make sure that the facilities are right. Otherwise, as myself, for me, it's like, can I have a shower and can I use a toilet? 2 fundamental things, Everything else will fall into place. Not worried about the bed or anything, but them the 2 most fundamental things if we're staying for a week or so. But we have to plan it to make sure it's all right. But then you're paying extra for having something that you need.
Yeah. I'd heard somebody say, I'm not disabled in my wheelchair. I'm perfectly able. I can move around. I'm free. Yeah. But it's society that disables me by not providing a ramp or, not having adequate facilities.
Yeah. I mean, even when you're going out into town or whatever, and you're coming across paths that have got no, little ramp systems, and they've got big curbs and stuff like that. And it's okay if you're a fit young man or a fit individual that can get up that curb. But if you're somebody that was going to struggle, then that's just, you're then having to find a way to just get up a curb.
Yeah, you've got to wheel down the road until there's a drop curb.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
what about if you were flying somewhere and you needed the loo?
So flying when I need a loo. Obviously, well, now are we talking a number 1 or a number 2?
I'm talking a wee.
Wee-wees, right, brilliant. Listen, I can go anywhere. On a long-haul plane, with a blanket, and I was done it, flying back from LA, and, where you got passengers on one side and passengers in the front, and they didn't have a clue that I was doing my catheter.
So you just cover your knees with a blanket and away you go?
Yeah. Amazing. Brilliant. Yeah, great, and that's it, and that goes down to the product itself, because it's given me that much more independence, and again, it's your dignity and your self-worth, because you're preserving that, because you're not having to get all these things out to do it. I was doing my catheter going up Ben Nevis. I'm not having to worry about, well, actually, I need to go to get a sterile environment and stuff like that. Okay, I had my hand wash and I used to do that, but because of the package itself, it was already protected, and it had my confidence enough to do it, so I know that I wasn't going to get an infection anyway.
That's amazing. So I'm thinking about love making, just coming to a close. If you had a bladder or bowel accident in the act of love making, how does that pan out?
But I wouldn't. Because 1, you do your catheter before anyway, so you make sure everything's empty, which is done. And 2, my bowels, I control my bowels anyway, so on that side, you wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Brilliant. So that's it's not even present in your mind. I know for some people there is even though they're fairly certain, there's a concern that, oh, what if? But for you, you're absolutely sure we're sorted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant.
If there's one thing that I would say to anybody that's going through the journey of, the wheelchair journey, the change of abilities and everything else, is don't be frightened to ask questions. Don't be frightened to seek advice, whether it's from the doctors, the nurses, the therapists, or even somebody that's already in that position. Because it's just human nature, and we go through these processes, and it's not an embarrassment. Don't feel embarrassed about it, because we've all been there.
Okay. So if, in conclusion, you were asked to give some top tips, what would your top tips be?
I would say make sure that you're comfortable with you, and realise that your body is going to alter its sensitivity with losing feeling, so you're going to have more sensitive areas, and utilise that and get pleasure out of the partner or your wife or your husband that you're with, because that's where it's all going to come from. It's a two-way process. Don't feel that it's got to be all one-sided.
Yeah. So for me, in conclusion, I think it's been apparent throughout our discussion that you have maintained great communication, but also you're quite curious.
Yeah.
You're curious about how you can make things better.
Yeah.
How you can be a great dad, how you can be a great lover and partner. And for me, communication and curiosity in rehab are absolutely key. Lastly, I know that you've done loads of diving, and were you a diver before your injury? I don't think so.
No, I've only been diving for just over a year. I've only been diving since losing my leg.
Right, so how did that come about, and what are your aspirations?
It's weird because like every year I like a challenge. For me, my mental health has got to be, I need to be doing something. I need to have, and I work full time and we've got family and everything, but I need to have a goal, whether it's Kilimanjaro or skydiving, whatever. So when I lost my leg, it was like, what am I going to do? And a dive centre came to me and said, Shaun, do you fancy doing this? You're going to be the first paraplegic amputee to go through this specific qualification. Do you fancy doing it? And yeah, of course, let's go for it. So I'm now working towards my advanced deep diving. From there, we're looking to develop an adapted scuba diving qualification for anybody with any disabilities or any abilities to enjoy the freedom of being underwater and the weightlessness, and it's amazing. Absolutely, I love it. Addicted to it.
Yeah, and so in terms of different abilities, do you need a guide or are you completely free in the water?
I know you're completely free, but we are working with a young man who is blind, so I'm his guide at the moment.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I was quite excited at the moment because that's another thing that I like to do. I like to get my teeth into, have little projects, Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, I'd like to say a massive thank you to you today. You've been absolutely brilliant, totally open, as I fully expected. And I'm sure that watching this back is going to be of massive value to newly injured people. So thanks loads, Shaun.
No, you're more than welcome. Thank you.